Touching on some of the entrepreneurial lessons that we've talked about in a past episode, we initially set out to talk about three in one episode. We only got to one. Here's one of the other ones that you had. This was no job is too small, but a lot of jobs are too big. Learn to say no or say it's above your pay grade. Wise, valuable. One thing you've mentioned is you're not doing on-farm pickup right now. You're stopping that, putting that on hold. I mean, does that fall under this lesson? It's like it's just too big for the time right now.
Yeah, 100%. Um, you know, sort of the thought is like one, it's like we're here, we have like we live on the farm now, so we can do it. So let's just get going and let's just get cash flow going. And I think I made that decision just kind of out of a gut feeling. I mean, there's definitely some wisdom involved in that, but and I think now kind of kind of having everything ready for the market, realizing it's like, oh, I'm definitely spreading myself way too thin and could potentially have this like really good problem of like if I would have started on farm pickup a month ago, I don't know if I would even have enough stuff to really make a successful market happen. And so it's like, I mean, yeah, good problem to have. Like I've sold too much stuff, but that just doesn't look good showing up to market with half as much as what you wanted to. And so, and also just spread myself thin. I would be rushing to get the online store built out the way I want it to and functioning well, have sort of my like drop off points that I'm wanting to do in place. And I think I just realized like that's just, you're biting off more than you can chew. And a month or 2 months of potential sales is, it would be nice, but if we can dial in and get this market going, then we can actually see like, oh, like, cause I have to be able to provide inventory. If I put, I have 20 bunches of broccolini available for the online store this week and I sell out all 20 and I'm like, dang it, I only have 5 bunches left for the market. Like that's not good. As opposed to, oh, I've got a month under my belt selling at the market. I know I'm consistently selling 30, 40 bunches. So tough luck. I'm just not even going to offer it on the online store. Um, and and it's and maybe it's slim pick, yeah, and then maybe I'm doing so well at the market that frankly my inventory for the online store is so slim that it doesn't even feel worth it. And what sales I would get would be pretty minuscule, and it's not even worth the time. So pushing it off until I know that I can handle that load, I feel like is the wisest decision I could make.
You may never come back to it too. I mean, that's the reality of it, right?
Yeah, the market may just be so amazing that it's like I'm not even going to bother with doing this. Like I wanted to do it to offer it to people around here, but frankly, it's like if the market's killing it, then we'll address that maybe next year where we can plan our production around.
Yeah, I've had a lot of quote good ideas that I killed for this exact reason that have never became reality.
Yeah,
It's the worst place. Like for me, I hate being in this position of spread too thin, and I find myself there more often than I would care to admit. It it feels overwhelming. It feels like you just can't catch a break, catch a breath. It feels like you're scrambling instead of doing everything at 90% quality. You start getting stuff done to get it done, and most of it probably isn't important. Most of it probably isn't urgent or needed. So this is a big thing for me. I've sat back over the last few weeks and looked at stuff because I'm very guilty of taking on these jobs that look small but end up being too big. It's like, oh, I can fix that leak.
yeah,
And you start fixing the leak and realize, oh, there's systemic mold. Take the whole house down to the studs. And it just becomes this huge iceberg problem. So I need to do a better job of myself of like saying no to the too small jobs and instead of taking them on. So it's been for me, it's like kind of same thing. It's like triaging stuff off. Like if I just stop doing this, would it matter? Does it move the needle? Like getting rid of those things. And if it just buys me some sanity, some stress
Hmm.
relief, like it's huge. Um, because I think we always feel like doing more leads to more. Like, oh, if I
Yeah.
just, if I offer this extra thing, like we'll just make more. But it's like, really, will you? And what's the cost of doing that? So yeah, I hear you. I mean, you
And
must have been
and
burned
then
by this, right?
yeah, and another like this isn't just in business, like spreading yourself too thin in that, because obviously you're an entrepreneur, like you're this is a part of your everyday life in a lot of cases. And like moving here, we've been here a month and a half in the new place. And talking about it initially, it was like I'm gonna have so much more time on the farm. That was like goal number one. It's like, oh my God, I'm gonna have just hours and hours and hours to devote to production and to building out the farm more and more. And the reality of it is like I have spent more time than I was before we moved, but the unforeseen benefit was I'm actually home more. Like that wasn't kind of that was, I was kind of venting some of my frustrations to my wife of like, I just don't like we moved here and I just don't feel like I'm really getting any more done than I was before. She's like, yeah, but you're here. Because before it's like I'm leaving Crystal Organic, driving out here to the farm, working until 9 o'clock and getting home and the kids are already in bed. I miss dinner and I'm up and at them before they're awake and all that. And now it's like I can come home, I swing by the house, hug and kiss the kids and the wife, grab something to eat, maybe even like scarf down dinner, and then run over there and can still be back by bedtime. And so even spreading myself too thin, could be all right, great. We've moved here and now Alec's just always at the farm all the time. And so so that's been like an added sort of pivot to the way that I've spent my time. Is it hasn't really allotted me an ex an, a large amount of added time dedicated to the farm, but it's allowed me to be a better husband, to be a better dad, which keeps me from being so stressed, which means that when I do go to the farm, it's focused, it's calculated, and it's far more productive. So yeah, and it's just like choosing to know like all right, this is too big of a project. We're not even going to tackle this. You just need to go home. And yeah.
You know what the crazy mental reality of that situation is even if you took that time away from the family and worked more, you'd still feel like you weren't getting enough done.
Yeah.
Like you scraped every bit off of the house, like, sorry, honey, I gotta work. You'd still feel like I'm not doing enough. Like
Yeah.
that, I think, is the business owner syndrome. You could work 24/7 and you'd still be behind and still have more to do.
And I probably would have been able to justify doing the on-farm pickup, which would have meant I'm still spreading myself too thin. And so by realizing it's like, no, here's sort of my flow and my time that I'm allotting myself to be there. And it was from that. It was from realizing it's like, man, so I want to then take another evening out of my week to dedicate to setting everything up and entertaining people that come to the farm for a couple hours to do all that. And it's like, oof, maybe we really need to wait until we can either come up with a better system to where like we've built a farm stand to where it's self-serve. Maybe that's the way we do it. Or yeah, maybe we just don't do on-farm pickup at all. Or maybe we do it once a month and it becomes like an event. And so being able to force myself to not grind and hustle as much as I want to sort of puts everything in perspective and realize like, oh, no, I probably just need to just zero in on this one thing, do it really well, and still have a life outside of it.
Do you think that the stuff you think you need to be doing, you actually need to do?
At this point, there's so much that still needs to be done that I don't feel like there's a lot of fluff that I'm dedicating my time to. Um,
But
it's
is it
still
but does it need to be done now?
oh yeah, no. I mean, I've more or less halted build out, and I'm just focused in on growing on like the third of an acre that I have right now, and then hopefully, um, a couple markets under my belt. I got a little bit of cash flow. I can, like I'll be scaling back at Crystal Organic to devote some more time. So then I can devote, maybe after lunch, once it's started to warm up and I'm not really harvesting anything, like now it's time to build out for a couple hours. And if I can get a couple hours of build out in every single week, come July, the other block will be done, and then so on and so forth.
Yeah, I asked just because you're like my one person support group here now in the moment. And yeah, I was thinking about this recently of, like if I did nothing this week, what critical system would collapse?
Hmm.
Like would everything grind to a halt? And it was like, no, some optional things wouldn't get done. And it just helped me reframe of this, like, oh, I have so much to do. And then I had to step back and be like, really? Like, one shoulder, the person on one shoulder is like, really, do you have
Yeah.
so much that you have to do? What is all that stuff that has to get done that you're putting all this pressure on yourself to do? And I looked at it, I'm like, yeah, I guess I'm right, shoulder guy. I don't have to do all that stuff now. And yeah, it can get done at some point, but does it have to be done like 911? And that's where I think I struggle. It's like if it needs to be done, it seems like it's needs to be done yesterday in my head versus like, yeah, if I get this done over the next month as I have time, that's a win. But I'll find myself being like, oh, it's got to happen now. It's got to happen now. And like nobody except me is going to notice it's going to happen now.
Yeah.
And I think the other problem with like these little jobs that turn out to be too big is like I'll dramatically underestimate. Like you look at like kind of the meat of the task and you're like, oh, I can bang that out in 2 hours. But then you forget like maybe all the setup that goes into it or the cleanup at the end, the little post stuff. So the job, you probably saw this with painting houses,
Oh
right?
my
Like, oh, I
God.
can
Yeah.
paint this room in an hour, but how long to set up the tarps and bring in the ladder and prep the corners and tape stuff off and then get our gear in here. And then when we're done to wash the brushes and suddenly the painting was the shortest part of the whole job.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, looking at another lesson, and I think this one's interesting because in my experience, I'd say a lot of people are guilty of this, and it's what's your niche, focus on what you do best, and know what you're getting into before casting a wider net. So, what's the life experience that caused you to say, identify your niche and focus on what you do best?
Yeah, that stemmed from the year that I was trying to get the foodscaping business off the ground. I think I foolishly thought right out of the gate that I could just focus on that. Like the only work that I do revolves around putting edible plants in the ground. And the reality of it was like the very first, like day one, very first customer that I had, first job that I sold, and the lady goes, "Can you mow my lawn?" And it's like, and it's like, I haven't made any sales yet. Frankly, I'm paying for this out of my pocket just to get things going. It's like I could really use the cash. It's like, yeah, sure, I'll mow your lawn. And it's like, oh no, like can you just become my landscaper? Can you do that for me? And it's like, never want to tell the customer no, leaving money on the table. Yeah, sure, I could do it. And the problem was, is like, if it would have just been the one day foodscaping, plant some edible stuff, do the blueberry bushes, and be done with it. Yeah, a job that's 55 minutes away, it would have been fine. But then suddenly I find myself driving 55 minutes like every other week to mow this friggin' lady's lawn because like I didn't stick to my guns on what I need to do, but also I think I underestimated how niche my business was, and that there wouldn't be other things that would kind of get my foot in the door. And so what ended up happening was is I committed to something that frankly I didn't have the equipment to do. I had a riding lawnmower, but it had just like crapped out. So I'm literally driving an hour to then push mow this lady's lawn because that's all I have because I can't afford to buy a zero turn lawnmower. But then also to stay competitive, I'm trying to stay somewhere in the price range of the guy that has a whole crew, and they did 15 lawns that day with a zero turn and a crew of guys. And and so I'm over here like doing this work for next to nothing because I didn't stick to my niche, and I also didn't plan ahead to think about like maybe I need to sort of change my direction on what I'm doing. And I had people tell me like you should think about just going into landscaping and let the foodscaping sort of be the value add on top of that. And it's like I don't want to be mowing lawns all day long and then trying to sell this other thing. Like I don't want to be a landscaper. And then boom, I find myself becoming a landscaper and ended up making more money from mowing lawns than I ever did from doing foodscaping. And I was miserable, which is why I finally was just like, screw this, I'm done. And so, um, not to say that I wouldn't have ever done that. Obviously, I didn't do it, but it's like I would have just said like, no, I don't do that. I'm sorry. If that is a deal breaker for this service, then it's not. But frankly, if I would have just told her like, no, sorry, I don't really mow lawns, she'd be like, okay, and then I would have just had that one sale, done the job, made my money, moved on to the next job, and go on forward with that. And so that was like I suddenly signed myself up for a landscaping company day one of starting the foodscaping business, totally unintentionally, and yeah, that was a disaster.
Yeah, the farm example of this is I'm going to just sell baby vegetables or I'm going to sell some sort of exotic specialty veg only. And there's definitely people doing that, or like I just sell edible flowers, or
Yeah.
but those people have been in the market, they found ways to move it there. I don't think the average person can start there. Or,
Hmm.
it's like I just sell some sort of, exotic meat that I raise type
Yeah.
thing. Like it's just too niche. There's the saying of you have to find a niche in the market and then a market in the niche. So
That's
whatever
good.
you choose, there's got to be enough people there to pay what you need to pay. Like one thing like my kids and I got sucked into is that show Forged in Fire, and I'm amazed at the amount of people that want to be a full-time bladesmith, so make custom knives.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, how is that even possible?
Yeah.
I like I don't get it. Because I mean, you're making maybe a knife a day. How much do you have to sell that knife for to make it a living? But then you start watching YouTube videos, guilty of going down that rabbit hole. And this is the $10,000, copper Damascus knife that I made. And apparently, like, there's people out there that just like buy this stuff. So, but it's such a small sliver that I think people they watch a show like Forge and Fire and like, oh, I just want to do that without realizing like that customer base isn't huge. You got to have a unique angle to get in with them. Like they have to pay a premium price, and it's the same for anything. Even people selling. I don't want to belittle like the crops you grow and other people, but just the generic market garden veg, right? Like even that's a niche
Hmm.
within the vegetable space. And fortunately, there's enough people there that buy that stuff. But it's definitely, I think, a consideration because you
And I think
did.
on the other side of that, you have so it's like, yeah, I was kind of guilty of both in this example. It's like I niche down too much, thinking that like the market's going to be there. I think this is great, so everyone's going to think it's great, and everyone's going to pay for it. Um, and then very quickly, immediately broke down and bent over and was willing to then just do whatever. So it's almost like I'm going to be the edible flower farmer, and then you go to your first market and someone's like, oh yeah, these are really great and I want to buy these, but it's like, can you also do, sweet corn for me? And it's like, yes, if you'll buy it, I'll grow it. And the next thing you know, you're spreading yourself too thin again, and you're growing like long season stuff that has like really poor yields, like zero profit margin, that takes up so much stinking space. And so it's like you have both extremes, and I was guilty of in one fell swoop of like overcommitting to the way too niche down product, and then also immediately bending the knee and saying, I'll give you the world as long as you'll pay for it.
Yeah, I think the great thing about a niche is if there's a market there and you can be known as the farmer that grows that stuff, like you can anchor that territory. Because it'd be hard for other people to get in because some of these crops are real finicky. They only have a limited customer base. So it's like restaurants know, like, I want the weird stuff. I got to go to Evan. Like, Evan Chender is one of the people I've interviewed in the past who does like those types of crops. Real
Yeah.
exotic, but he's got a market for them. And like, he's the person in that market to do it. So
He's
it's,
the guy that's like forcing radicchio, right? Like the culinary
I
gardener.
believe so. I believe so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Like, real probably extremely fun stuff to grow from a grower standpoint, but that the general public would just be like, I don't know what it is. Like, you might see it in a food and wine magazine, but Joe Public is just like, that's a plant.
Yeah. That's the nastiest tasting lettuce I've ever had.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Not appreciated by all. But he can make a living doing it, kind of name his price because there's like
Hmm.
no competition. It's the guy selling custom knives. And the danger is you set out there and again you don't have the market, like you can't move enough volume. So it'd be like your journey into farming here is as you get into this market is like, what do you guys become known for? Do you start to specialize in something? And maybe it's just the general market garden crops. Maybe your crops are that different from what truck farmers and gardener farmer has at the market that you just stand out by having the stuff that we all identify as very familiar market garden crops, and that's what makes you different. But then maybe
Hmm.
it pivots along the way, like over the summer it's like, oh, people really want this style tomato, and you start growing that, and then people come to you for that. So I think there's an evolution to it along the way. Coffee, you did something with coffee, right, too?
Yeah, I ran a coffee shop and it's the head roaster for a while there.
Okay, so there I look at like I often think I'm in a competitive space, but then I look at the food industry and I'm like, no
Oh
way.
my God.
Like, I mean, how many coffee shops are there? How many types of coffee from online to custom roasters? Like, it's a battleground. The coffee shop, like how would you try and do to differentiate that in what's already a crowded space?
Well, I would say, that was like a constant battle because there was the owners who were much more focused on like the customer experience and the story. Like we had a nonprofit, we were doing a lot in the community, all of that sort of stuff. And then you have like me, head roaster, and the manager of the coffee shop, who both came from like a coffee background, and we're trying to do the niche of high end specialty. No one else around here is doing this, and they're fighting, saying like, well, we just need to like welcome everybody in and create this amazing environment, and like smoothies was the example. We're like, I will never make a smoothie behind this bar, for the rest of my life. And they're like, well, we have to do it. And of course, they're the owners. They won. We did it, and people freaking loved them. And so that was an example of you can go the like high end specialty route, which is like super sexy and like latte art, and you have like the massive weird like immersion drip sort of thing where it like drips one drip of cold brew every like 35 seconds, and that's how you do it. And or you've got like basically knocking off Starbucks, where you do as many different things as possible. And frankly, like both of those are a niche. And yeah, and neither one is right, neither one is wrong. And now where they're at, they've sort of found their balance of like doing really like well roasted, really well crafted coffee, and then also doing this other stuff. And they do it with excellence, and they charge what they need to charge for it. And they're way more profitable and way more successful now than they ever were when I was trying to call the shots and make it, the snootiest coffee shop this side of Atlanta.
Yeah. And I wonder if people get scared to go into a niche. Like,
Mm,
because if you think about it, whether you're a content creator, a musician, an entertainer, like the worst thing to be is just not memorable,
yeah,
middle of the road. And the risk of going into a niche is you're different. You stand out for a good reason, for a bad reason. And I think a lot of people they feel comfort in just blending in. And there's also some risk if you niche down too much, you you're wrong, potentially wrong, and it's your fault.
yeah,
I thought this would be a great idea. If it fails, well, damn, it's on me. And like, I don't know that I want to make a decision where I'm then blaming myself for going down that road. And if it's too big of a decision, like you sink the business. But if you look at anything really successful, it's somebody or some organization that does something really well. They don't do everything. I mean, there's probably some examples of that, right? Like when now people do everything, but it's like we just make great pizza. We make the best espresso.
mhm,
And yeah, Starbucks and Domino's can pull off wide expansion across categories, but the average person cannot. You wouldn't open, it's like the Seinfeld episode of the Dream Cafe. Hey, we sell everything. And then he went to Pakistani, and actually that ended up killing him. But yeah, I think that that's a tough spot for people to be in. How do I own a category within my market? Because frankly, I mean, the market garden space isn't getting any easier. I see people who order Jangs and paper pot transplanters, and they're most likely new farms. Like there's more new farms going in all the time.
yeah.
What are they going to do different? I mean, you're a new farm. There's only so many markets that don't have anybody getting into it. What differentiates you when you show up at that farmers market? What differentiates you when you put word out in that community? If you're just selling sweet corn like everybody else, how do you survive? So that, and there's no right answer. I think everybody also wants the silver bullet of like just do this. But it's a blend of market research, your personality, your interests, those types of things that help you find out how you can, truly fit in and stand out from the crowd.
And I think kind of how I ended up where I've ended up doing what I'm doing, like it's a really good example of that. It was a day picking something, I don't know. And I'm telling Nicholas like what I'm planning on doing, and I'm like doing bag salad, doing these mixes, greens. And and the market that I'm doing was the one market that I'm like, I'm not gonna do that market. Like I didn't even consider it or whatever. And then Nicholas says, they've actually reached out to us to sell stuff at that market because they don't have anybody growing like the greens and the stuff that you're wanting to do. And he's like, they're wanting what you have. Like you should really think about it. And it was just like, oh my God, like it's like I found the niche, like, or the niche found me in a weird sort of way. And so it's like that's what the niche is going to be at the market. And that's the whole reason why I picked it. Not because it's going to be the busiest, not because it's going to be you know, in the best area as far as like, median income or whatever, but it's like, oh no, the thing that I'm wanting to grow that I feel like I can grow really well, like they don't have it. as opposed to me find the market that has the best foot traffic or is in the highest income area, which is one of the other markets I looked at. It's like, man, it's in a really high income area. Um, and so like, yeah, that's a great example of like, like if I would have ended up at another market, I would have either been just another face in the crowd, or I'm just huffing to try to sell something that nobody's going to buy. And so thankfully I was able to, like I said, that niche sort of found me and I don't have to pivot too much. And as I'm hearing myself say this, I need to remember like, yeah, this is the reason why you're your market. So don't try to overcommit. Don't try to do stuff. And like tomatoes is a great example. I didn't really want to do a ton of tomatoes. One, because tomatoes are like not the easiest thing to grow. There's just so many problems with pests and disease. And, do you do like single leader, lower and lean, or do you do like floor wheat? There's like so many different ways to do it, and they can all be a total disaster, or you can just end up with so much stuff. Like, how am I going to move all this inventory? And so I was already kind of leaning into like, I don't really want to go all in on tomatoes like everybody else does. And then I find out at the market there's a lady, and that's like all she does is like tomatoes and like greenhouse tomatoes, peppers, and she's doing it year round. And it's like, okay, so good thing I'm not doubling down on the tomato business, because then I'm competing with someone who's probably doing it better at a better price, more consistently, and with an established name. And so it's like, you know, we'll see how tomatoes go. And it's like I might not do any of them next year. Um, yeah, and so it's like choosing to stick to my guns with what this niche is going to be, and like ride it out and see if it works.
Yeah, hopefully you can find some segment within that market to own. You can be the salad guy or to be named later crop
Yeah,
guy to
or the
provide that.
broccolini guy. I already know what it's going to be.
There you go, right? Like lock that stuff down. Because you're right. You go to a crowded market, there's always trade-offs. This market might be banging, but there's 10 veg vendors there and you're number 11. And what's the
Yeah.
difference?
Hmm.
Nothing. You guys are pricing against each other and it's just a war. And some of those might be tractor farmers that have those efficiencies. So it becomes really hard. It could also be like around here in Vista, where I'm from, there's like hundreds of Mexican restaurants. Like, no joke.
Yeah.
You're not going to find a Chinese restaurant. None work. You think like, oh, I'll put a Chinese restaurant in here, right? Like, there's none around to do well. No, it won't. Uh, for like a lot of them, they're very budget friendly. I'll call them, to be polite, style restaurants. And we're always like, man, it'd be really nice if like a high end Mexican restaurant went in that like really showcased Mexican cooking and it wasn't just, takeout. So one went in, really good food, didn't last very long. A cheaper takeout place went in its place, and now it's booming amongst the one
Yeah.
across the street and the one right down the block. And it's like at some places, it's like the community just likes what it likes, and more of it is means more for everybody, and nobody's complaining. And in other places, it's like, nope, one of this, one of this, one of this, and we can't handle the stack. So you never know on it. Farm tools are a good thing. Like I've thought a lot about this over the past 6, 7 years. It's like, where do you go within that? Do you carry everything? Like, do you carry shovels and rakes?
Mm.
You carry a BCS, right? To greenhouses, there's so much within there. When you look at just the farm tool space, you have, high mowing, predominantly a seed company. You have Farmer's Friend. I get they have the greens harvester, mostly tunnels. You have Johnny's that is kind of a blend, equipment and tools. We're more on the tool side of things, but everybody kind of has their pocket of what you're trying to do. And the more you, even like you think about this from the farm side, the more crops I grow, well, I now have to have more knowledge to grow those crops. I have to have, the fertility or bed prep regime for those crops. I have to have the maybe extra equipment to deal with those crops. Tomatoes require all specialized equipment that you wouldn't need if you're not growing tomatoes. So that's where you just add more complexity to the operation of like your tomato decision. It's like, is it worth it to do it? I don't know. If I take it on, well, I got to have this, this, and this. Maybe I can sell, more lettuce, get more turns of lettuce on those beds the whole time. So there's a cost that comes with diversity. There's a cost that comes with specialization. Just what fits with your market stream. If you could grow, like, what would be your dream scenario? I meaning I have a farm and assume you could sell it all. I had a farm and would grow blank.
I mean, really, it would be like the kind of the small bunching stuff. Like it just like that's the stuff that we eat. We're not like we're eating greens, we're eating like tons of broccoli, broccolini, we're eating carrot. I mean, it's all of the small bunching type things or like salad mixes or greens mixes and things like that. Um and then like we'll throw like winter squash in them just because like I know that's not going to be the most efficient thing that I'm growing, but I love it. I love eating it. I love growing it. Um, and I think that excitement and energy that I have for it sort of translates and people were really excited about it and bought a lot of it last year. So yeah, it would probably be like, um, yeah, we're doing like baby root vegetables, um, some greens and sort of greens related things, and then winter squash. And like I'm not even super pumped about zucchini and yellow squash because it's like, yeah, I mean everybody grows it, grows like a weed. It's the old trope of like, yeah, and your neighbor ends up with a crate full of zucchini because you just grow so many and you can't get rid of them all. And so um like more or less where I'm at is kind of like the ideal of what I want to be at. Um, Yeah, like I mean, just plus it just works with my brain. Like I know what uh my tendencies, like my ADHD brain wants it. Like it likes quick change, likes some diversity, but not overwhelming diversity. Things that you see a lot of like rapid growth and rapid turnover. Those sort of things kind of keep me engaged as opposed to like, man, I'm just staring at that whole field of whatever for months and months and months and just waiting, 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 waiting. And it's like I want to mess with it. Like, do I need to weed it again? No. And it's like let's just sort of focus on the high turnover stuff that can kind of keep me engaged, keep me going. And then it's like, oh, I got tired of doing broccolini for the last whatever. Everyone's like, well, boom, that space is now filled with some other new, shiny, exciting thing. And then by the time that wanes down, then we move back to the other thing.
Just find a limited selection, do it well, hammer
Yeah,
that, and
yeah,
just repeat, get really good at it.
but not so niche. Yeah, not like I have these are my five things, and I just like sling them as fast and as high profitability as I can. And that's like sort of trying to find that balance between like a full diet farm and you know the guy that sells microgreens and salanova lettuce, and that's it.
What if that opportunity came your way? Could you mentally like do that? If it was just like, hey, a grocery store account or something, a big wholesaler, and like, we'll buy as much salad mix as you can provide a week. Just keep it coming, and where the whole farm becomes salad mix. Like, would you be into that?
That'd be tough. I guess I wouldn't rule it out just from like a business standpoint because it's like, man, if the market's there, the market's there. You know, but kind of like back to the whole like stick to your guns thing and stick to your niche. It's like I might be able to do that for a little bit. Then am I going to get burned out on that? Because like painting is a great example. Like I started the painting business and did that because it's like I'm good at it. There's money to be made. And it's like, do I love doing it? Not really, but it's fine. Like making money will make it worth it. And it was like a year in, I'm like, this is not worth it. I'm miserable doing the same godforsaken thing day in and day out. And so it's like but I could do a job every now and then. It's like, oh, this is great, and then move on to something else. And so, I would opt to say probably not, knowing my tendencies and knowing that, like, doing the same thing day in and day out with the same crop, um, I would just kind of lose interest. And, that's just sort of my personality. Like, I know how my brain works. I know what kind of keeps me excited and keeps me motivated. And it's not the numbers and it's not really the money. And I feel like if you're just pumping out salad mix to sell to whoever, then it's like, you know, I don't know anybody that's so passionate about agriculture that they're so passionate about just salad. Like, I think it's sort of the idea of, like, feeding people and giving them this diversity of things. And you have the colors and the textures. And, like, I don't want to discount the sort of the magical sort of beauty of that, because it definitely plays into that, at least for me. And so, and if I'm not in it for the money to an extent, like, I'm not in it about, like, let's just try to get as profitable as humanly possible, or, like, let's nerd out about the numbers. It's like, that's not where I am. So I don't think I could ever do that.
It's a tricky spot that business owners could face themselves in that position. Obviously, none of this is a guarantee. It's not a guarantee if you specialize, it's not a guarantee if you don't specialize. But if you specialize for like in one thing and you get an account or several accounts, you just did that and it works and it makes money. And I mean, heck, that's what like Taylor Farms out here and places in Yuma and El Centro do. And they've got thousands of acres of lettuce and like just grow lettuce. That's what we do. And they're looking at it from a business standpoint. And I wonder, because I empathize with you. Like I have some similarity there in my thoughts. Do we as entrepreneurs hurt ourselves by turning away that opportunity where the Taylor Farms are like, man, we're pounding the table, give me more land, more lettuce, keep it rolling.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I like a lot of things in life, but having consistent cash flow makes life easier and I can do those other things with my time.
Yeah. Or, like, how would you feel however many years into modern grower that it's going, if you were, like, just selling paper pot, like, if it was still paper pot co, and that was all you did was sell that, like, would you be like, oh man, profits are up, everything's great, we're doing great, I'm happy as I've ever been? Or is it this, like, is it something about being able to provide this subtle diversity of things that can then really help people out, and they can get these multiple things from us that we've done a lot of work to find what's going to be the most helpful and the most bang for their buck and the most, like, efficient for a farmer, and that's what kind of keeps the business pumping on, like, a motivational standpoint.
100% honest truth, I'd sell one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it was like a shovel and everybody needed that shovel. Boring, but think after just dealing with a lot of ups and downs, turbulence, the thought of that is pretty attractive. Like if it did enough, then it would be like, well, I'll just have somebody run it. Like I
Yeah.
don't need to be involved. And
Yeah.
that's what I think of in the salad mix example. It's like, great, if that account just runs, and I don't want to speak because I don't totally know on this, but like Jeremy Mueller, his farm, I think they just grow mostly salad mix. And he's involved and he probably loves it because he gets to add efficiencies and harvesting and things like that. But I could see myself being like, I'll get somebody in here who can just do this. This becomes a machine and
Mhm.
I'll do other things. If that enables me to do podcasts like this, great. Or I have a garden on the side and I do that type of thing. What I don't think I could do is do one thing if it wasn't big enough to, like, if it was solely dependent on me.
Yeah.
If it was a solopreneur thing, unless it was like, in my case, like content creation or writing or something like that, that it's ever changing. But if it was like doing something like running a hot dog stand,
Yeah.
selling paper pot stuff, um, whatever it was, mail order clothing, and it was like me doing that same thing, no way. I would
Yeah.
start eventually that I would start to go insane. Like, and I started to have that in my past career where it was like you're doing the same thing. And when I was in finance, it was like it's kind of the same thing every day. New numbers, new names, but there's no change. That got old. I got done with that. I needed some excitement in it.
Yeah.
But I guess from my business wisdom, if you told me I could buy a business that just pumped out cash flow and could be systematized to have somebody else run it, a car wash, a
Mm.
laundromat, a parking lot that charges, rental property, that is very attractive to me.
Yeah. Something that kind of leans into more of like not full on passive income, but more of like a more passive income stream. Because that's what you said. I mean, it's like, and if someone can run it for me, I think like that's the key. That's the key differentiator. Like if I'm on my 1 acre and it's me and maybe like one other person helping me, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna be miserable just doing salad mix. But if I'm able to build the business and change this or whatever, and I kind of become the like big picture guy, kind of CEO, then and there's so much that I would imagine would be involved in running the business. That's yeah, and putting out fires and doing all that. That there is not that. Then suddenly it's like, man, I wish I could just focus on this one thing, and just create cash flow to then free up my time to do the things that I actually love. Yeah, like I definitely see that. And I think you're right. The key is like, are you the solopreneur doing it day in and day out? And that's the big deal breaker right there for or the deal maker.
Yeah, part of me at this point too would trade some days of less decision making for just manual tasks of, oh, you just got to move compost all day. Or I used to work at a golf course and mow fairways. It's like, hey, just sit on the machine, go up and down all day. Yeah,
Well, if
like,
you want some manual work, I got plenty for you.
yeah, fly over, right? I mean, I think this is the challenge of businesses in this scale, the scale that you operate at, I operate at, people listening to this operate at, where it's 1 to 10 employees, you know, probably less than $1 million in sales. And not, it's not, it's not really a machine
Mm,
like a service station or something, right? Where it's just, you set it up and it just runs. It's heavily dependent on us. The markets are maybe finicky. There's never total stability, and I don't want to pretend there is for any business because there's not. Um, but it makes it hard to detach, I think, from the business because
mm.
you're always involved, which is tough from a just a life balance standpoint. Um, so yeah, part of me does crave like that automation of like, let's just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. We get bigger, we do more of the same thing. You get more people to help out like that. I don't know. That's just where some of my thoughts are. But I don't know. It's like small farms. Like as you do this today, how old are you today?
30.
30. Like, could you see, assume this year is successful. Like, would you want to do this for 30 more years? Relatively the same model, have an acre-ish, go to the farmer's market, like grow these crops. Like, can you see yourself doing that for 30 years?
probably at the scale and in the capacity that I'm doing it, probably not. Um, and I think that's less about the business model and it's more about me as a person. I mean, even what we talked about before we started recording, like I'm already thinking about the next thing, not like the exit strategy, but just kind of the next layer to the cake that is kind of being an entrepreneur. Um, and so I yeah, because I mean, I actually kind of had that thought today. It's like, are are you talking and trying to encourage people to start a business, where it's like you'll make a modest living and you're going to work your ass off, and do that for the next 30 years? If you yourself are not, pre- if you're not planning on just doing that, like I would love to be able to start dipping into like educating and encouraging people in this space, or yeah, just helping other people do it, or replicate the model and so on and so forth. And so yeah, I mean, I think it would be hard to imagine 60-year-old Alec, um yeah, being on an acre out there by himself, making it happen, spending every Saturday, 3/4 of the year for the next 30 years of my life, standing at a market booth, just doing that. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, just in all candidness, yeah, that doesn't sound like the life that I've dreamed of living.
Yeah. When you think entrepreneurs, they're very idea driven and start driven, I think. So
Mhm.
something takes 10 steps. I think entrepreneurs are excited about like steps 1 through 3. And I don't want to act like ideas are everything because I don't think ideas mean anything. I think it's all about execution of the right idea. If you just have great ideas, never, so many people have great ideas and don't jack. You have to actually implement them. And a lot of entrepreneurs are great at 1 through 3. And then it becomes you need somebody who executes. Like I just come in and I execute. I don't want to come up with the idea. I don't want to go through the tough times of building the market. I don't want to figure out the initial model, but I'll come in and run it. And I think I'm more in the entrepreneur side of this. And it sounds like you are too, where it's like, yeah, like I'm excited to get it started, but once the model's running and stable, it's like, am I best suited or most interested in repeating it year after year after year? Or do I then have somebody who maybe handles that and I work on, okay, well, we have this model. Let's add on, you had pickles. Let's see if we can bring pickles into this fold.
Yeah,
Is a value add or coffee and like you start doing bolt-ons for lack of a better word or something else where you use your skills but you still have the wisdom of what you've done to start because that's the tricky part. You'll learn so much in like years 1 through 5 of starting this farm that
mhm,
will be invaluable, but I can see where it can get boring.
yeah,
And so what do you do, like tell your family like I'm done with this? Can you, like, if accounting nerds like, oh, this business is super successful, you shouldn't let this lapse or go. You're like, I'm just over it. Like, I'm bored. It's like, do you be true to yourself? I don't know. And I think people probably put themselves through a lot of stress by not living the right role where
mm,
their dream of entrepreneurship becomes successful. They beat the odds and they do it and they're like, hey, we're going. But if you're not the one that's maybe like into the farming at that point, like it's like, all right, I've grown enough lettuce. Like I don't, lettuce does not bring me joy every day.
Yeah.
Now you're like, you own a job
Hmm.
and it's successful. So it's like, it's hard to say, like, uh, I'm out of here. Well, let's do something with this. But I can see how people can become discontented. And maybe that's just some sort of, I feel like somebody from 1900 working in a steel mill would like punch me in the mouth and be like, Sonny, those are
Yeah.
2024 first world problems.
Yeah.
Shut the F up and get to work. But I mean, it's just, that's stuff I think about.
Mhm.
And where
Well,
people,
and it's like, how many out of all the people that you've interviewed, you know, how many of them do you think are just like the question that you posed to me? It's like, you want to just do this for the next 30 years? Or how many of them are more like me, um, that are kind of like always thinking the big picture, the next layer to the cake, what's the next problem that I get to solve? Because it's like I work with a guy who's trying to get his farm going, and I legitimately believe that he could just like he's trying to start like a seed garlic business. And it's like, I think he could just be a like have a successful seed garlic growing operation, and he's gonna be happy as a clam. And for me, that makes me want to like rip my hair out just thinking about that. So it's like, yeah, I mean, like, just take snapshot market farmers, new farmers getting things going. Like, I mean, how many of those people do you think would just be totally cool to just do this for the rest of their life?
I mean, I'll tangent, but come back. My neighbor is a really successful immigrant who started a landscaping business. Since I've lived here for about 10 years, he's just blown up his crew, like really expanded. He himself owns it. He grinds stumps every day. That's like his thing. Like, I love to
Mm,
just grind up stumps. But he's got, multiple trucks now, like 10 people that work for him. He's into it. If I look at some successful farmers, just pulling random examples off the top of my head of, you look at like Jenny Quiner at Dog Patch Urban Gardens. She's not really in the field farming anymore.
mm,
She started their salad dressing line and is thinking big picture because that's where her value add, no pun intended, to the business is. That's, she's much more valuable to say, what can we do to enhance the overall worth of the business, deliver more value to the customer by solving customer problems, providing solutions, and iterating on the business. Eric Schultz at Steadfast Farms, same thing. Like,
mhm.
he's not like, yay, I get to go harvest Salanova today.
Yeah.
Um, JM,
Oh, yeah.
there's, Ben Hartman. There's so many people, Ray Tyler. Now there's obviously, I mean, you see Nicholas, right? Like, he's been in farming for 25, 30 years. What
30
does he
years.
what does he do every day? Like, do you think he enjoys the field work, or is he more into the business side?
Um, I mean, I don't know how candid we get in our conversations,
But just from what
but
you see.
yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, as hard as he works and is like hands on as he continues to be, um, it would be hard. I'd be hard pressed to not say that he doesn't enjoy it still. I mean, because like I said, he's out there in the trenches. He's not like pushing off. Like, he left picking arugula with me to like, I'm gonna go help, this other guy like weed the trenches between the greenhouses. It's like, he doesn't have to do that. And so it's like, whether it's from like a obligation to the business or whatever, or if it's just because, he just enjoys doing that. Like, I mean, it has to be an element of enjoyment and satisfaction to do that sort of stuff. Because, yeah, there's no reason why he couldn't just like farm out all that, no pun intended, like farm out all that work to us, to let him just do the things that, you know, that are like easy or like not as taxing on his body. So like, he has to enjoy it.
Yeah, well, you are what you do.
Yeah.
If you do it, that's who you are.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't do it, or you get somebody else to do it. And I don't think there's a right or wrong here, but I think here's examples of farms that are successful that have owners that have different approaches. So the point I want to convey is like you got to know yourself,
Exactly.
and you only get so much time in life. You should enjoy this time. You've chosen this path of creating your own destiny. You've succeeded in doing it if you have a successful business. There's no reason to be miserable in your success. And whatever makes you happy, find a way to do more of that. If that means field work, then and it doesn't hurt the business and it helps the business, and that's where you can think you can add the most value, do that. If you think like, hey, I have these ideas of things I want to try without, I mean, you definitely see bad examples of like, I have this great business and I try some harebrained idea and like I pull all the cash out of the cash cow business and,
Hmm.
I fund some crazy scheme and that goes belly up. But you do those things. And I mean, that's I think where a lot of my mid business life crisis is. Am I the operator? Am I the CEO role? Um, where do I have to be? Because it's not as clear. It's not just like, oh, I just pick a route and do that. There's obviously skill things that have to come into play. There's only so much labor to go around. There's tasks that do have to be done. There's only so much cash to go around. So that all plays into it. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to shape what I do is in my career to make it more of that. Like my career as a business owner versus this is my job that I own. Like that's where I don't like feeling. And I've definitely felt that
Yeah.
like I got to do this today. Um versus like I just enjoy the journey. And here's where we go and I'll do these things. And for me, like I said, that's probably at the 1 through 3 step of like starting something up. So we'll see where you go, right? Like get through this year first and then look at the next 29 years.
Yeah. Let's see. We'll check in.